So this is the session I referred to the last two times I was on stage about resolving competing interests or franchising responsibly. And so I think this is extremely important. This sort of rounds out what we were hoping to offer up in terms of franchise sales education for the day. So people who are interested in us taking track of their attendance at this event, please blip the barcode behind me. This is a unique barcode for this particular session. And just fill it out, and then we will do the rest. So we invite you to do that. Please, as many of you do it as possible. That would be great. And I can probably make it more convenient as well. But so this is a great session. John and I actually had a conversation with just about everybody about this session and how to execute it. But John, I think it's best just to turn it over to you.
Yeah.
All right, man.
So real quickly as we get started, raise your hand if you're a franchisor. Okay. Any franchisees? Awesome. Suppliers? And then how about brokers? And franchise sales organizations, FSOs? Awesome. All right, good. So the reason I asked that is we're going to be speaking kind of to everybody almost individually, and that's kind of the point of the session. So we're incredibly excited about it. A couple things, right? So responsible franchising, ethical franchising, it's gotten a lot of momentum, right? I think it's a concept that kind of has its time has come, but a lot of the conversation around it, at least from my perspective, has been a little bit sanctimonious, right? And I promise you that we are not here to preach today, right? The reality is that this is going to impact all of your businesses a little bit differently, and that's actually what we're here to talk about. When Lane asked me to participate in the session, I said I had one caveat. The 85% of responsible and ethical franchising it's just self-evident, right? It's a little bit common sense. I mean, we can all agree on a lot of the sort of implications of it, right? Transparent contracts, focus on profitability, focus on sustainable growth, right? Focus on kind of franchisee at the top of the pyramid. What really interests me, and we talked as a panel, what kind of equally interested all the parties was where do things not line up, right? Where does one participant group in the franchise community, where does their interest in responsible franchising not line up with another party, right, or another group? And I'll give you a good example of that from me personally as a franchisor. And Robert and I chatted about this morning. As we think about what the future state of this looks like, whether from a regulatory standpoint or from a market-driven standpoint, I want to be able to continue to hold my franchisees accountable to upholding brand standards, even as those brand standards evolve over time, whether that means I'm introducing new protocol, right? Whether it means laws have changed. I want to be able to hold my franchisees to an ongoing and ever-evolving brand standard. And under sort of the current proposed regulatory environment, that's going to be inhibited. Now, Robert would tell you, what would you say about that?
Right. No. So as a franchise owner, you might think that I'd be all for regulation and protecting franchisee investment, and obviously franchisees should be treated as investors. But a franchise agreement shouldn't be fair. Right? The franchisor needs power. And as John said, he needs to continue with his brand to enforce the standards, and the standards will need to change. But as a franchisee, there's very little in that franchise agreement that obligates the franchisor. One thing it does obligate the franchisor to do in almost every franchise agreement is to protect the brand, whether it's the IP, the integrity of the brand, the goodwill of the brand. And I would rely on John to protect my goodwill in the brand from franchisees that aren't keeping up the brand standards, because that protects me from them and protects us all, each other. So there's a fair amount of, when people say contracts aren't fair, I think that's disingenuous.
So that's just an example, right? And what each of us are going to talk about, and there's a sort of a representative of each of the major kind of segments in franchising up here on the panel. We're going to talk about the things that are important to us as it relates to sort of the common definition of ethical or responsible franchising. And what you'll get is a sense for where the things overlap and where they don't. Okay. We want this to be interactive, right? So to the extent that you've got questions throughout the panel, please ask away. Okay. I guess we should have started with introductions. I'm John. Nice to see you all. CEO of Hand & Stone. We're a 660-unit franchise system.
Is it on? Sarah Davies. I'm the General Counsel of the International Franchise Association. If you don't know IFA, we're the trade association for franchising. So our membership is comprised of franchisors, franchisees, and suppliers to franchise companies.
I'm Mary Thompson, CEO of BNI, the world's largest business referral networking organization. And we have about 2,000 locations in 71 countries. Our vision, which we should always be talking about, is to change the way the world does business. And I've done everything from cookies, food franchising, to home services franchising, to now B2B. And so I've made every mistake when we talk about the responsible franchising. I thought today I would share with you those mistakes and where I really struggled, because maybe that might give you something to think about. And I just want to say one last thing before I hand it over. David Barr said, I don't want to make you uncomfortable here. I would tell you, I do want to make you uncomfortable. I'm really glad that you're in here, those of you who are sitting here in this room. Comfort is the enemy of growth. And if we want to grow, and I would contend that responsible franchising is plain, old-fashioned, good franchising. It's a win, win, win. Our customer wins, our franchise owner wins, and our franchise wins, in that order.
Hi, I'm Michael Mudd. I'm the CEO of Brand One Franchise Development. Brand One's the nation's premier franchise growth organization. We work with 17 brands in all the different growth cycles, micro stage, emerging stage, and we also work with enterprise brands. SkyZone would be an example of an enterprise brand. We have several clients in the room, so we work with all stages. We help them attract and really recruit amazing franchise owners to their system that match their ideal candidate profile. Thanks.
Rob Branca. I'm a Dunkin' franchise owner, leader in that system. You heard Bob Rosenberg talk about the advisory council system that he set up. That is still active and running. Also an example of responsible franchising. I'm also a member of the board of the International Franchise Association and the Coalition of Franchisee Associations.
Great. Who wants to start?
I always like to start.
I knew the answer to that question before I asked it.
Churchill said the price of greatness is responsibility, and we all want to be great. I'm looking at this room. It's not as full as it was when David was in here, because David has great things to say, and this is an uncomfortable conversation. So I commend you. I started thinking about. It's funny because John called me and he goes, "We are not going to lecture. We're not going to lecture, and we shouldn't be." Because what we should be doing is having an open, honest conversation. And so I thought I'd start with how we select franchise owners and how we do that. David said, and I loved what he said about the average franchisee, the average franchise owner. And I always call my franchisees franchise owners because they own their business. Never want to forget that. And over the years, I've struggled. What does the great or the good or average franchise owner look like? And so in a lot of the brands I've worked with, we've had qualification summaries. So we say, there's a list of 10 things that we want them qualified. We want them to have enough money. We want them to have this type of profile. We want them to have done this. We want this. We want this. And let's say there's 10 things, and a person comes in and they have 8 of the 10, or they have 6 of the 10, or they have 5 of the 10, but the 5 they have are amazing. In good franchising, what is my floor and what is my ceiling? And so one of the things I think we have to think about is when we're selecting those franchise owners and we're deciding who to bring in, and I love that David said, that people will say, well, I just need better franchise owners. No, we need the best system possible. I need to know exactly what I'm going to say no to and be strong in that. And I can tell you my first year as president of Mr. Rooter, I was not strong in that. I was a brand new president. I was trying to figure out what I was doing, and I was like, let's sell franchises. Let's sell franchises. And my floor was not right. And we brought in some people who really struggled. And what let me sleep at night was I knew that if I could get them to follow the system, they would do well. But I brought in people that weren't inclined, some of them, to follow the system. Now, the flip side is when there have been some companies that, when I was part of Neighborly, we acquired or somebody we're looking at, and we look for this perfection. And we say, they've got to have 10 out of 10. If they don't have 10 out of 10, we're not going to take them. And that's a problem, too. And I see Rob looking over here. You're about to say something, because I think you are.
Yeah, I'm going to quote Nigel Travis, who is a franchise icon, a colleague and friend of many of ours. He said, as a franchisor, you get the franchisees you deserve, right? And again, also responsible franchising. The franchisor may not say it in the contract, but you do have a responsibility to these franchisees. As David said, they give you their life savings. And, you know, I worked on this Article 11 commission that came up with the SB 919, the broker, third-party seller disclosure law in California. Some others in this room and on the stage did as well. And the idea is to look at a franchisee as an investor. I buy a share of McDonald's. What could I lose? Today, $293.36. I buy a McDonald's franchise, and it doesn't work. What could I lose? Everything, right? And that should be ever present in a franchisor's mind. That's responsible franchising.
So, Mike, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, right? Because I think what Mary articulated is important, right? If, as a brand, if you've got this standard, a 10 out of 10 standard, whether it's 10 out of 10 or it's 8 out of 10, if a franchisee says, I have a minimum standard by which my candidates need to meet, how does that jive with your world?
Okay, so this is kind of interesting, guys. So we work with brands in all kinds of life cycles, and you want to make that as data specific as you can. But some of these brands don't have a platform that they can go and they don't know. Like, who's small that has 10 franchise owners in your system? Can you tell me exactly what the profile is that drives the performance? You might not know that. So you almost have to gut check that, and it's. I would say culture should be part of what you're recruiting. If you're not recruiting culture, you're probably doing it wrong. So what we do as an organization is really understand the brand. Not only is it just the money and is it the experience and is what they've done, but do they fit the culture? And really you should be building a relationship with your franchise owners that's built on trust, like, and respect. You need to be able to trust that person. They need to be able to trust you. And you need to be able to work with them in a way that, think of them as like your customer. As a franchisor, your customer isn't necessarily your end user. It's the franchise owner whose customer, their customer is the end user. So you really need to set up a way that you can work with that person in a meaningful way. And the culture fit should be very, very important to you. So how are you going to find culture? Like, is there a profiling tool for that? No. Like, you gotta learn to find out what the definition of winning of this franchise owner is, because not everybody has the same definition of winning, and you need to make sure your system can predictably produce their definition of winning. That's literally what it is. And you need to make sure they have the right capital, you need to make sure they have the right culture fit, you need to make sure they have the right experience, you need to make sure they have the right outlook, and probably most importantly, you need to set the right expectation, Teza, because if you set somebody's false expectations, if they don't have realistic understanding of what it's like when they join your system, they're going to already be disgruntled the first day they get started in it. So transparency in the process and making sure you're finding the right fit. And I would put culture into your mix, not just capital and not just experience.
So on one side of the perspective, you've got, I want to establish a really clear profile of what the optimal candidate and ultimately the optimal franchisee looks like. And on the other side of the other end of the spectrum, it's how do I make sure that I'm delivering that to you, right? So the expectation and the obligation is really on both parties to make sure that in the end, what lands is a new franchisee in a responsible manner, right? Robert, you brought up a really good point about franchisees being investors. Mary, how do you think about that relative to your franchisees? Do you see them as investors?
I see them as lots of things. Really, seriously, they are, and I've had lawyers tell me, do not call them partners. Don't call them partners. They're not partners. Don't call them customers. They're not customers. They're an internal customer of ours. They are a partner of ours. We're partnered in what we're doing, and I just spent last week with General McChrystal, who wrote Team of Teams, and got to do a whole session with him, and it was amazing. And it brought me back to this. You know, we have a distributed force out there, and you know, if you've ever read his book, he was the commander of JSOC, and he had teams out everywhere doing what they had to do in Afghanistan, everywhere. And he couldn't be where every team was. We can't be where our franchise owners are. So we have to make sure, when David talked about the vision and the mission, we have to be very, very clear. And I see our franchise owners as the person who's going to deliver the promise to our customer. So that's why I like culture. Culture matters. I absolutely believe that. And we have to make sure that we have shared the vision and the mission, and that we're not hiding behind a desk. I'm a big believer in town halls and getting in front of them. And so with our franchise owners, they will deliver what we are promising that we need to do. And so we have to arm them with the system. We have to arm them with the brand. We have to arm them. Some of them will be good in one thing and not good in another. We have to arm them with good, strong training. And lastly, we have to arm them with the truth. And so a good book, The Servant, talks about leading with love. And David talked about you got to love them. Leading with love is not soft and squishy. It's actually quite hard. It's giving people what they need and not necessarily what they want. So it's sitting down in coaching and one-to-ones with your franchise owners to say, this isn't happening, and it may cause you to have failure, and let's address it because I love you and I want to see you successful.
Yeah, and one other thing I'd like to stress, what Mary talked about town halls, and you heard Bob Rosenberg this morning talking about how they changed course, right? They developed a program to be able to communicate with their franchisees, and that turned the business around. And I'm a benefit of the heritage of that and a leader in that system now. And we have bylaws and we have regular meetings and subcommittees in every part of the business. This committee touches every part of the business. Nothing happens without alignment between the franchisor and the franchisees. And you know, we could be against Starbucks. Somebody in Seattle flips a switch and everybody has to turn and move in that same direction. And that doesn't always work as well with employees, as you can see right now. But with Dunkin', we get buy-in, right? We're sitting there, we're talking to each other, we're having internal disagreements, difficult conversations, and you know, a franchisor and a franchisee are in business together, but they are not in the same business. You have to always remember that. Top line and bottom line are different, and you have to meet in the middle somewhere on everything. And capital investment, that comes out of the franchisee's pocket. One of the axioms of franchising is the franchisee always gets the bill, right? So, you know, you keep that in mind. I keep that in mind constantly. And I'm a franchisor as well. So, you know, you always have to be mindful of that. And if you're constantly communicating and you have ground rules, and you can always go back to those ground rules when the conversation gets difficult, right? And you can say, like, I'm leading from love, like Mary just described. This is okay, this is not okay, right? And you get buy-in, and then the franchisees will hold each other accountable. You won't have to do it, right? Because they'll say, hey, look, we're in this mission, we're doing this is how we make money, this is a business, these are the rules. And if you establish that system, it takes time, emotions, there's a lot of emotion that happens in these meetings sometimes, and resources. Right? And you may be struggling, as David described, when you're trying to get to 50 units, 100 units. Trust me, this is an investment that will pay for decades. Look at the Dunkin' system. The investment they made in the early 70s is still paying off today, 2024. So, you know, keep that in mind as you bring in franchisees. Establish a formal way to communicate with them and engage in it consistently. That's responsible franchising.
Robert, it's a really, really good point. And I know part of what the IFA has worked on, and I know part of what is sort of emerging in the various, you know, whether it's from the FTC or whether it's state level bills. One of the provisions that's kind of emerging as a theme is the establishment of franchisee forums, right? Official or unofficial franchisee forums. Sarah, if you could maybe give us a little bit of your perspective on it, and then I'd like to see if any of the group on the panel has a specific perspective on it that we can share that might be helpful for the emerging franchisors in the room.
Sure. So, and as Rob alluded to, he participated with a number of folks in the room and members of ours from the franchisor, franchisee, and supplier community in developing policy recommendations that IFA published in May of this year, our responsible franchising recommendations. While they were published in May, they're not new. It's not to say that, up until May, franchising has been irresponsible. Quite the opposite. I feel like I have to say it because people keep asking. And I just want to roll through them quickly, and I think that what will probably resonate with you is it just makes sense. And the first one is setting clear expectations for all parties, for franchisors, for franchisees, through a robust and transparent disclosure process. How many of you have read cover to cover a franchise disclosure document? Oh my God, look at you all, amazing. The vast majority of prospective franchisees do not, because it's long and it sucks and it's really boring, and you need a law degree to navigate it. And so much of the work that IFA has been doing is around how can we just improve, take the information that's currently in 23 items that don't make any sense and communicate them in a conversation with a prospective franchisee, with a reader, so that they understand the franchise opportunity they're considering. So that's recommendation 1. Recommendation 2 is what Michael alluded to. Due diligence, connecting a franchisee that fits with a franchisor, for whom that also fits with that franchisee, and one piece that somebody in the broker community raised to me that I wasn't even thinking about is there's a due diligence piece for brokers and FSOs also. That's so important for brokers to not only due diligence of prospective franchisees, but due diligence on the franchisors that you're working with. So that's 2. Third is, once you're in that relationship, ensuring that everyone is committed to their obligations. And I've heard a couple of times, don't put any obligations in your franchise agreement for franchisors. That's just, I'm not your lawyer, but that's a bad start for a relationship, right? I'm not going to do anything for you, you do everything for me. So have that mindset of, right, it's a two-way street, and you need your franchisees. So the third one is everyone's committed to their obligations in the relationship. Fourth is focusing on the collective profitability of all stakeholders, right? Franchising doesn't work if franchisees aren't profitable. Franchising doesn't work if franchisors aren't profitable. And the fifth one, which is the one you just touched on, is communication with your franchisees, whether that's directly with franchisees in town halls, through franchise advisory councils, independent franchisee associations. If you're not talking to your franchisees and making them feel heard, regulators are. So are plaintiffs' attorneys. So listen to your franchisees. They're smart. They're out there running your business. They are the touch point to your customers. And so that is, the first 4 bullets, all relate to the work that we're doing on the disclosure piece. The fifth one is really, IFA's focus on relationships. And it's so important to you all being able to operate the business that you have in the way that makes sense for you, without, stifling regulation that won't allow you to make decisions for your businesses and the industries in the way that it makes sense for you.
Something that Sarah touched on, and then Aaron, I see your hand up. Something that Sarah touched on is communication. And so those of you who have 10 or maybe 50 franchise owners at this point, you may be talking to a franchise owner very regularly, and maybe 3 a day, maybe 10 a day. And you're going to blink your eyes, and one day you're going to have 100, and you're going to have a hard time thinking about when was the last time you really had a good conversation with a franchise owner. I have to really think about that long and hard. I'm sure you do, John. How many franchise owners do you have?
248.
Yeah, just a few, right? And so I think that you need to have mechanisms in place to make sure that you're listening to them. If you're not surveying them and asking them how they think, feel, and about the brand and what you're doing, you're probably missing something there. I've always liked FBR, but there's plenty of ways to do it. You need to have time to have town halls regularly, have videos go out to, if they don't know what your strategic pillars are, they don't understand where you're going and why you're doing it. And then lastly, and Rob, you touched on it, is the franchise owner always has to sit at the table. So you don't have a franchise unless you have the franchisee and the franchisor in the same room. And so when you're thinking about, I'm a fan of steercos, so you have a big project and you've got work to do on it, and you've got to think about all the things. You should have a franchisee. You should have somebody, a franchise owner from here, and somebody over here from this department, and somebody from this department. You should be listening to them.
Yep. Raise your hand again if you're a franchisor. Keep it up if you have a formal body, some sort of formal body, everything from a fully independent council to committees. Keep them high. Awesome. So, yeah. So, Robert, maybe we'll start with you on this. What is your, as a franchisee, right? What is your expectation of your franchisor relative to their use of a formal body? Talk about sort of the range.
Sure. So in ours, we're, obviously a mature system, and we just, every election cycle, we're elected, right? So we choose our own franchisee leaders, which I think is critically important.
Independent or
This
not?
is the franchise. We have an independent franchisee association that's different from our franchise advisory council.
Okay.
But our advisory council is elected. We have written bylaws. I'm on the steering. I'm a lawyer, so I'm the only lawyer in the group. So I write the bylaws, and we have a committee that we pass them through. And actually, I was on the phone about an election dispute because we're in an election season right now within our system. And it's hotly contested, typically, because those positions bring power and influence. So it's very important to have written rules. And I think also, and I do want to touch on something that came up, is system change. And that's crazy important right now, right? A franchise agreement you signed 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, did you have a digital loyalty program? Did you even think there was one? A mobile order and pay app? Third-party delivery from your phone? None of that is in my franchise agreement, yet we had to respond to the consumer. And that costs money, and as I said, franchisees always get the bill.
Not always.
Yeah, always.
Not always.
And so how do you manage that? There are systems that had major disruption because, and you can read about it in the trade press right now, email went out, you're now being charged $2 per order or $20 a month, or now we have a tech fee, now we have a loyalty fee for every transaction. We negotiated. We're like, this came up, we need to do this. We don't want to be the brand that is not available to the consumer sitting on their couch on their phone, because that person wants our product, and if we don't deliver it to them, somebody else will. How are we going to pay for it? So we went through all of that. It took longer, perhaps, and we did the same thing with branded products sold outside our stores, right? A box of K-Cups, a pound of coffee, a ready-to-drink bottle of iced coffee. It took us 17 months to come to a contract, and we signed a contract. We share 50% of the revenues of products sold outside our stores. That's the first time in the history of franchising that's happened. It's the only time, to my knowledge. But that got the entire, we have 10,000 stores in the United States alone. That got all of us pulling to sell those products in convenience stores and supermarkets and not fight it, right? Because we're profiting from it. And everybody, the franchisor and the franchisees, are making much more money with that program than we could have otherwise. And again, that was a long conversation. We had studies, we had data. It was widely shared in the advisory. It was confidential, so we couldn't share with everyone. But everybody in that room knew everything before we made the decision. And we had it written down in a memorandum of understanding that every franchisee had to opt into.
So that's a good example of one end of the spectrum, right? For emerging franchisors that are sitting out there right now. Like, if you go to maybe the other end of the spectrum, right? Still a desire to create a highly engaged body of some sort. What does that look like? Mary, do you have a perspective on that, or?
So when you say a highly engaged buy-in, it's like one of the things I always think about is your business will change, and you have to be brave enough to say, okay, everybody, this has changed, and now we got to do something about it. I'm a fan of task forces that fall underneath FAC. So I'll give you an example. When Mr. Reuter needed new uniforms, that is very expensive to the franchise owner. And believe it or not, plumbers are very picky about the uniforms they wear. And they want the special kind of pockets on the side. And you'd be stunned if you knew how picky they were. And so we formed a task force that had plumbers or technicians on it, that had franchise owners on it, that had a suppliers on it because they were going to be providing that, and had people from the headquarters as well. And a task force is not it lives forever. It lives for maybe 18 months to 2 years. It has a mission. Our mission is to study the uniform and figure out what we need to do and get that uniform decided upon. It was probably worded much better than that. And then they met regularly and worked through that issue. And the franchise owners that were on it, they helped evangelize that afterwards because they were part, I heard someone say once, if someone is engaged, they have to believe and know two things. They have to know that tomorrow will be bigger than today, and they have to know how they fit in. And so they understood that, and they knew it, and they shared it with their fellow franchise owners. And task forces can be a very effective way of doing that.
Michael, you oversee 22 systems. Is that 17 franchise systems that you're involved with? Have you seen examples of really good, highly engaged, formal relationships in any of those systems?
I mean, most of our brands have something that they're forming. Either the franchisor selects franchisees that sit on the FAC, or the franchisee body elects people to the FAC. There's always going to be a head of the FAC. I've seen it done very well. I think SkyZone has a really good FAC that's set up. But there should be some structure, because as something is being rolled out to the system, it helps you roll it out with like those FAC members are going to be the ones that are highly influential in your system. So if you can get them on board, because they're going to be part of the decision process, that anything that you're rolling out should be rolled out to them, and then they should influence the franchise community, not the franchisee trying to jam it down their throat.
Right, and if you don't form that group, trust me,
It will form.
there'll be one
Yes.
formed,
Yeah,
and there'll be a lawyer involved.
I
So.
see that too.
I want to. Aaron's got a question. I want to talk a little bit about the progression of the formal bodies in our system. But Aaron, go ahead.
So, many of the franchisors here, they need to find franchisees. That is the biggest problem that emerging franchisors I find have. It's how to find franchisees. So,
We'll restate the question.
okay, I'll just yell really loud. Everyone hear me now? I can't. Okay, it's cool. I got a loud voice. All right, so the biggest problem that I see emerging franchisors have is they can't find franchisees. That's the biggest issue that I see. And so they need to find franchisees that they can then develop these formal bodies. Sure. And they need franchise fees to pay for the support to develop the formal bodies. I think what I've seen as it relates to responsible franchising, one of the biggest issues, and I think where there's a lot of finger pointing, is in the franchise sales process. So I'd love to hear from you guys on that, because what I find is the emerging brands say, I don't know how to find franchisees. They go to an outsourced franchise development company. They say, in order to get any traction in the broker community, you're going to have to present the brand as semi-passive or semi-absentee. Then the brokers say, well, the FSO says we got to do it, and there's finger point. And then everyone says, well, the brand had to approve the person at the end, so there's all this finger point. And ultimately, better late than never. I feel like responsible franchising starts in the franchise sales process, because that's the expectations that they have going into this, and that's the beginning of the relationship.
Yeah.
And so how do we protect, in your guys' mind, the finger pointing of, this guy said that I had to do it? Because they come to me and they say, hey, I've talked to 6 franchise sales organizations, and they all told me that in order to get any traction in franchise sales,
you got to present it as you can put a manager in place.
You want to start over and repeat the first part? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
I'm good.
Just kidding. Michael, do you want to maybe take the lead on that to start?
That's a good one, guys. So this goes back to just being transparent, right? It's like understanding and having a real conversation of what it's going to take to be successful with your franchise system, and just be transparent about it, guys. Like we have a lot of brands that need an owner-operated franchisee, period. And we say that to our candidate. We tell that to the consultants. You have to educate the franchise consultants on what you're looking for, and they'll give you that candidate. So yes, there is more candidates in the pool that want semi-absentee opportunities today than there ever has been. Okay, just look at the market conditions. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of people that are looking for an owner-operated, franchise opportunity. So what you have to do is just understand your brand. What is it going to work? What's it going to need? And you need to be realistic, and you need to be transparent to the candidate that you're talking to, guys. I think that it boils down in this responsible franchising is that we have honest conversations and we give them realistic perspectives. Okay, there's so many people painting illusions out there, and I think that's what you're talking about. At the end of the day, we can be realistic. Now, I'll tell you, my experience is there's a huge candidate pool out there for owner-operated franchise owners. There is, period. Okay, so I think you can get that candidate. You just need to be able to articulate it and have the relationships to get those candidates for you.
Aaron, I'm going to tell you a story for a minute because it's very relevant to this. For those of you who know me, you know I was a Marine. If you ever spend any time with me, I'm never late. Marine Corps beat that into me. As I was getting ready to leave the Marine Corps, they had a class of women recruits in the officer program that had 100% failure rate. They went through OCS and 100% of them failed. And they took 7 women. I was one of them. They brought us into headquarters Marine Corps, and we spent a week trying to figure out why they failed and what happened. And what happened was we had recruiters out in the field saying, don't worry, it's not going to be that hard. You don't have to run very far. The packs aren't really that heavy, and the boots you're going to really enjoy wearing. And seriously, and we went and we found that when David talks about the data, we found the data that proved that. Then what we did is we went and studied the women that were, and there was a group of us they studied who had been meritoriously promoted, and they found that those women were like, we don't want it to be easy. We want to know up front that it's going to be hard. And what was happening is they were recruiting the wrong kind of person because they were giving the wrong message. And to your point, Michael, there are people out there who are looking to change their life and control their destiny and want to have the right franchise and belong to that. We have to be brave enough to tell them it's going to be the hardest thing you ever did. You're going to love it, but it's going to be hard. And the number one source of unhappiness in this world is missed expectations. And so I would argue that to that point, we have to hold the ground. We have to say, this is going to be hard. You're going to have to do this. You're going to need to do that. It's going to be, and it's the hardest job you're ever going to love. And this is what we're going to require and need. And they will come. And will it be hard at first? Yes. But the hard things are the ones that last and go on. I think when we go down the easy road of bending on that, that's when 4 years down the road you start having issues.
Right. In terms of transparency, anybody that's on LinkedIn, if you've got franchise anywhere in your profile, you're getting pitched on absentee ownership, profitable opportunities. Just it's a swamp, right? And Aaron and I have talked about this, right, many times. And that's what IFA finally, our board said we have to do something because the government's going to do something if we don't. And I know it's controversial. A lot of people don't like. We have brokers in the room that support it because they're good and honest brokers, right? that their consultants are educated, know what the laws are, know what to say, know what not to say. And again, owner-operator or somebody that's a multi-unit, they're honest with their prospects. That's not the industry, right? And maybe it's 10%, 20%, I don't know, but it makes enough noise to taint all of us in this room. And it's something that we all need to take seriously.
Yeah, Aaron, there's no easy way to say this, right? But sometimes it means you're not growing as quickly as you want to, right? And there's no better time to establish that than right now as an emerging franchisor, to establish that practice internally and then to establish that expectation with, the rest of the franchise community that you interact with. If you're not, if you get downstream, right, and you have a problem with franchisee sentiment, if you have a problem with franchisee profitability, that's your responsibility, right? And the only, it's not your broker's responsibility, it's not the FSO's responsibility, it's not the franchisee's, responsibility, it's your responsibility. And to establish, this is the time to establish that really clear criteria. This is the time to establish that really clear set of expectations for when someone's going to join your system. And if that means that, and then it's your responsibility to hold those that are selling for you, if they're external, to that standard.
I should have been clear. Like, I do set the expectation, every single one of my franchises. We do all of our franchise.
I was talking to them, not you. I was just looking at you.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, no, I do. It's just the issue is they don't have the same relationships coming into it, the emerging brands. So they've got to rely on what they're told. That's all I was asking.
There's always going to be a delta between the pace at which you can grow and the pace at which you should grow. And in that gap, to me, that's one of the real clear tenets of responsible franchising.
I just want to add also and first to repeat what Aaron said, because I think it's so critically important, particularly with respect to everything IFA is doing, and it's the franchise relationship starts during the sales process. So everything that your prospective franchisee is getting in from you or from brokers or from FSOs or from your existing franchisees, all is like setting their expectations for that 10, 15, 20-year relationship. You want that to be as transparent and open and accurate as possible. The other piece is that, IFA supported increased transparency and disclosure with respect to third-party franchise sellers, brokers, and FSOs. We also are working as diligently on improving the FDD and the franchise sales process. And we really feel like that's where most of the momentum is going to come. To Aaron, to your point, is like helping prospective franchisees understand the investment. If you are a franchisor and you don't like the way that the FDD is currently structured and you would like to see it be simplified, I would love to talk to you. So please find me so that we can work on that together.
All right, we are officially out of time, but if there are other questions. Cost, yeah.
It is much more expensive for you to be irresponsible. I can tell you as a lawyer, you will spend so much more in litigation fees and settlement costs being irresponsible. Yes. And there are also, for those of you that aren't aware, there are criminal penalties in some states for being irresponsible. Validation is so key. Encourage prospective franchisees to talk to existing franchisees about their experience in the system.
So I think we are out of time. I'm going to see Lane on the steps, which always means we're out of time. Maybe I'll end with one thought, and then I'll pass it down to the rest of the group for their ending comments. My perspective on this is there is no definition of responsible franchising or ethical franchising, and I don't think there's an end game to it. Right? This exists on a continuum, and it starts with an intent, right? Whatever the principles of it you choose to adopt, it starts with an intent to just be a better franchisor, right? Or a better participant in the franchise community, whichever part of it you play. And then I think there's opportunities for that to continue to ratchet up over time, right? And I do think the best part about this entire conversation that it started outside of the franchise community and has kind of bled in. The best part of this entire conversation is that it started. Because we're all now openly talking about it and striving to be a little bit better at our respective parts of the community, every day. And so wherever you fall on that spectrum, the challenge is do your best to get better at it every day.
applause for our. So people went to great hardship to get here. I know Sarah's here for less than one. You're in and out, right, tonight?
Yes.
Right, in like hours. Mary came in. I begged her, and she was actually away, and I knew she had a window, and she graciously came. But I knew these people, and Michael too jumped in at the last minute. Rob, John helped me like figure out how to organize it because it's a topic that's evolving, and what we're trying to do is start a conversation, and those conversations should evolve in your own businesses based on your particular circumstances, right? We don't know what the answer is to cost to comply. It's not like there's a payment you can make to then be responsible. It's a way to act and a way that you conduct business that is challenging because you resolve competing interests every 3,500 times in one award because you're making all sorts of decisions and sizing up the prospect and the franchisor itself. It's a really hard topic to present because it's sort of brand new. These people did an amazing job. I couldn't have asked for more. Can I get a round of applause from Springboard Auctions? Okay, I think that concludes the programming part of our program today. We are all making our way to Chess Cafe is the name of the caterer. It's at the Waterworks, as Brad said, on Waterworks Drive. Anybody's trouble finding it, just text me or write me. But I'll see you all at 6:30. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, everybody.